paper fell from the old Bible like it had been waiting all these years for the light to touch it again. It slid out slow, yellowed and thin, landing at my feet as if it knew my eyes would find it first. My mother froze when she saw it. Her hands, strong from years of work and prayer, began to tremble. She whispered my name the way she did when danger was near, not loud, not soft, but heavy with fear. Outside, the prairie wind moved through the grass, and the distant drums from the encampment carried a warning I did not yet understand. That Bible had belonged to her mother, and before that, her mother's mother. It had crossed rivers, wars, and winters that broke good men. It stayed shut most days, opened only on Sundays or when sorrow came knocking. I had never seen anything fall from it before. Not a flower, not a ribbon, not a note. Yet there it was, folded small, edges worn smooth by hands long gone. My mother knelt down so fast her knees hit the floor hard, but she did not feel it. Her eyes locked on the paper like it was a snake ready to strike. She did not pick it up. She looked at me instead, and in her eyes was something I had never seen. Not grief, not anger, but the look of someone who knows the ground beneath them is about to give way. She told me to fetch the war chief. She said his name once, low and shaking, as if speaking it too loud would bring the past running back. Iron Elk. The name carried weight across the plains. Men stood straighter when he passed. Enemies lowered their eyes. Even the elders spoke his name with care. Iron Elk was not just a war leader. He was law, memory, and judgment wrapped into one man. He had survived battles no one else walked away from. His scars told stories he never spoke. He was known for his strength, but more for his calm. No one had ever seen him lose balance, not in war, not in council, not in grief. When my mother said his name, I knew this paper carried more than words. I ran. The camp stretched wide, lodges standing like silent witnesses under the open sky. Smoke curled upward from cooking fires. Children laughed near the river, unaware that something old and buried had just stirred. When I found Iron Elk, he was sharpening a blade, slow and steady. He looked up at me before I spoke, as if he already knew why I had come. His eyes were dark and clear, the kind that see through lies and straight into the bones of truth. He followed me without question. That alone told me the weight of what waited back at our cabin. When we stepped inside, the air felt thick, like the moments before a storm breaks. My mother was still on her knees. The paper lay untouched on the floor between her hands. She did not cry. Tears had not come yet. She looked like a woman standing at the edge of a deep ravine, deciding whether to look down. Iron Elk knelt, slow and respectful. He reached for the note, but before his fingers touched it, my mother spoke. Her voice cracked like dry wood in a fire. She said she had forgotten it was there. She said her mother told her never to open it unless the past came asking. She said the past had been quiet for many years, and she believed it was done with her. Iron Elk listened without moving. His face showed nothing, but his breath grew deeper. He unfolded the note with care, smoothing it out on his palm. The paper was covered in old writing, the ink faded but strong enough to survive time. As his eyes moved across the words, something changed. It was not sudden. It was like watching a mountain shift. His shoulders tightened, his jaw set. Then his breath caught, sharp and loud, like he had been struck. The blade he carried slipped from his other hand and hit the floor. Iron Elk fell to his knees. The sound was heavy.
Ow.
A man like him did not fall without reason. My mother let out a sound then, not a cry, but a broken breath that carried years of silence. I stepped forward, but Iron Elk raised his hand, stopping me. His eyes never left the note. They were wide now, filled with something close to disbelief. The war chief, who had faced death without fear, now shook like a man standing in winter water. He whispered a name from the note. A powerful name, one spoken only in stories told by firelight. A name tied to blood, betrayal, and a promise broken long before I was born. My heart began to pound. I realized then that this note was not just a message. It was a reckoning. It carried truth that had been buried for generations, hidden between prayers and pressed flowers. My mother finally wept. Her tears fell fast, soaking into the dirt floor. She said she never wanted me to know. She said she tried to live a simple life, far from war chiefs and old debts. She thought the Bible would keep it safe, keep it silent. But silence has a way of breaking free when it has waited too long. Iron Elk closed his eyes, pressing the note to his chest like it weighed more than stone. Outside, the wind rose. The drums stopped. Even the children's laughter faded, as if the land itself sensed the shift. Iron Elk stood slowly, unsteady now, and looked at me. His gaze was sharp, searching, almost fearful. He asked me if I knew who I was. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. Everything I thought I knew felt thin, like dust in my hands. He told my mother the past had found us at last. He said the war was not over, only sleeping. He said the note was proof of something the tribes and settlers both tried to erase. His voice carried sorrow, but also resolve. He folded the paper again and placed it back into the Bible, then closed it firmly, like sealing a wound that could still bleed. Before he left, he told me to be ready. He said, "Blood does not forget its own, and truth does not stay hidden forever." He said the land remembers names even when people try to bury them. Then he stepped out into the light, leaving my mother and me alone with the weight of what had been uncovered. That night, I lay awake listening to the wind scrape against the cabin walls. My mother did not sleep. She sat with the Bible in her lap, her fingers resting on the cover like it might burn her if she moved. I kept seeing Iron Elk falling, the strongest man I knew brought to his knees by a few lines of faded ink. Whatever that note held, it had the power to change everything, and as the moon rose over the plains, I understood one thing with chilling clarity. The story written in that Bible was not finished. It had only just begun, and when the truth fully unfolded, none of us would remain untouched. The days that followed moved slow, but the weight of them pressed hard. Word spread through the camp without words ever being spoken. People watched our cabin the way they watch a place struck by lightning, careful, curious, uneasy. My mother, Stone Willow, had always been known as quiet and steady. A woman who carried grief with dignity and joy, with restraint. Now she moved like someone carrying a hidden wound. She cooked, she cleaned, she prayed, but her eyes stayed distant, as if she were listening for a sound only she could hear. I tried to remember my childhood the way it truly was, not the way I had believed it to be. I had grown up thinking my father was a man lost to the plains, a traitor who never returned. That story had always felt thin, but I never questioned it. In those days, men vanished often. War, hunger, and distance took many without explanation. Now that old story felt like a blanket pulled too tight over something sharp. Iron Elk did not return the next morning, or the next. His absence was louder than his presence ever had been. Elders gathered more often. The drum circles grew longer at night, their rhythms slow and heavy. Even the horses seemed restless, stamping and snorting as if they sensed trouble riding on the wind. I asked Stone Willow what the note said. She shook her head and told me some truths arrive only when the heart is strong enough to carry them. I began to notice things I had ignored before. The way people sometimes studied my face too long. The way an elder named Black Crow once told me I walked like someone who belonged to two paths at once. The way Iron Elk had asked if I knew who I was, not who I thought I was. That question settled deep in my chest and refused to move. One evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the grass to fire, an old woman came to our door. Her name was Ash Bear. She had seen more winters than anyone left alive. Her back was bent, but her eyes were sharp as flint. She asked to sit. Stone Willow did not refuse her. When Ash Bear spoke, her voice carried the sound of stories that had never been written down. She told me of a time before my birth, when the plains burned with conflict and alliances were fragile as dry leaves. She spoke of a promise made between a war leader and a woman from outside the tribe. A promise meant to end bloodshed and protect a child yet unborn. She did not say names, but she did not need to. Every word pressed closer to the truth I feared. Ash Bear said that promise was broken by fear and betrayal. She said lies were told to protect power, and a child was hidden to keep peace that never truly came. She said some truths are buried not to save lives, but to delay the moment when justice comes demanding payment. When she finished, she looked at me long and steady. Then she left without another word. That night, Stone Willow finally spoke. She told me my grandmother was not born among the people she died with. She came from a settlement far east, fleeing violence that erased her family. She found shelter among the tribe and love where she did not expect it. That love was forbidden by many and feared by more. Stone Willow said her mother taught her to survive by silence, to protect what little peace she could find. She told me the Bible was given to her mother by a preacher who believed faith could bridge any divide. Inside it, the note was placed not as a confession, but as a safeguard. If the child ever needed protection, the truth would be there. If the past ever returned demanding answers, the truth would speak. Stone Willow said she prayed every day that moment would never come. I asked her if Iron Elk was tied to it. She did not answer. Her silence was answer enough. The next morning, riders came from the north. Their leader was Red Thunder, a man known for carrying messages no one wanted to hear. He spoke with Iron Elk in private, but his eyes found me more than once. When Iron Elk finally returned, his face was carved with resolve and sorrow in equal measure. He did not enter our cabin. He stood outside, looking toward the horizon, as if measuring how far the truth would travel once unleashed. I heard later that the note carried a name tied to leadership and bloodline, a name that could challenge authority and reopen old wounds. Some said it proved a rightful heir was hidden in plain sight. Others said it exposed a crime buried under years of forced peace. Fear grew like weeds, fed by whispers and half-dashed truths. Iron Elk sent messengers to distant camps. He ordered councils to be formed. He told the elders the land itself demanded honesty. Still, he would not look at me. That hurt more than his anger would have. It told me whatever truth lay ahead would change the way he saw me forever. At night, I dreamed of running across open ground, chased by voices calling my name in languages I barely understood. I woke with my heart racing, my hands clenched. The land outside felt closer now, watchful. Even the stars seemed to lean in. One evening, Iron Elk finally came inside. He sat across from me, the fire casting shadows across his scarred face. He told me my life had been shaped by choices made before I took my first breath. He said blood carries memory, and memory has power. He said the note did not make me something new. It revealed what had always been there. He asked me if I was ready to hear the full truth. Before I could answer, a horn sounded from the edge of camp. A warning call. Riders approached fast, carrying news that could not wait. Iron Elk stood at once, his jaw tight. Whatever was coming had arrived sooner than expected. Stone Willow clutched the Bible to her chest as the sound echoed across the plains. I stepped outside, feeling the ground beneath my feet like it was testing me. The past was no longer content to whisper. It was riding hard toward us, and I knew that once it reached our door, nothing would remain the same. The warning horn kept echoing through the lodges and over the riverbank, a long, uneasy sound that made even the dogs stop barking. People poured out of their tents and cabins, squinting into the late light. A line of riders came in hard from the west, horses lathered and breathing rough. Dust clung to the men like a second skin. Their faces carried the same look, the look of folks who have seen something they wish they had not. Iron Elk met them before they reached the council fire. Red Thunder was among them, and he swung down from his saddle with stiff legs. He spoke low, but the words moved like fire through dry grass. I caught pieces as they reached my ears. A stranger camped near the old cottonwood bend. A man asking questions. A man carrying a list of names. A man who knew about the Bible note. Stone Willow stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder, holding tight like she feared I might be taken by the wind. The Bible was pressed to her chest. I felt her shaking, small and steady at once. Iron Elk looked toward our cabin for one heartbeat, and turned away like he was trying to keep something from breaking open in his face. They called an urgent council before the sun fell. Elders gathered in a circle, their voices sharp with worry. Warriors stood at the edges, arms crossed, eyes scanning the darkening prairie. I sat near the back, not invited, and not chased away either. That was the strangest part. The camp treated me like a stone tossed into still water. Everyone felt the ripples, and no one knew what shape they would take. Red Thunder told the council what he had learned. The stranger was not alone. 2 more men had been seen watching from a distance. They carried good rifles and wore clean boots, the kind men wear when they do not walk for a living. They asked about an old promise made between tribes and settlers. They asked about a woman who carried a Bible across the plains. They asked about a child. When Red Thunder said the word child, the air changed. It tightened. A low murmur rose, then died. Iron Elk's hand clenched at his side. He stared at the ground for a moment, then spoke. His voice was calm, but it carried steel. He said the camp would not be hunted like game. He said the past would not be allowed to drag the living into the dirt without a fight. Ash Bear was there, quiet as a shadow. When she finally spoke, everyone listened. She said this was not only about outsiders. She said old jealousy still lived among our own people. She said there were those who feared what the note could prove. She said fear makes traitors out of men who once swore loyalty. Her words landed heavy. Eyes shifted. Suspicion moved through the circle like a cold draft. That night, guards were posted at every edge of camp. Fires were kept low. Children were pulled close. The horses were tied nearer. I walked back to our cabin with Stone Willow, and the sky felt too wide above us, too empty to be trusted. Every rustle of grass sounded like footsteps. Every distant owl call sounded like a signal. Inside, Stone Willow set the Bible on the table like it was a living thing that might bite. She told me to stay close. She told me to keep my voice down. I asked her why someone would come now, after all these years. She swallowed hard and said, "Because the land is changing." She said the rail lines are stretching closer, the lawmen are pushing farther, and people are grabbing at power before someone else does. Old claims are rising like bones after a flood. I thought of the stranger with a list of names. I thought of a note hidden in a holy book. I thought of Iron Elk falling to his knees. The pieces did not fit clean, but I could feel the shape of the truth, like a bruise beneath the skin. Before dawn, a young scout named Swift Coyote slipped into our cabin. He was lean and fast, eyes bright with urgency. He told Iron Elk's closest men that tracks had been found near the river. Someone had crossed in the night. Someone had come close enough to see the lodges, close enough to count them. That meant the strangers were not just passing through. They were measuring us. Iron Elk sent Swift Coyote and 2 others to shadow the outsiders, not to attack, only to watch and listen. He ordered Red Thunder to ride south and speak to allied camps to learn if similar questions had been asked there. He sent Black Crow to meet with the settlement elders, see if any lawmen had been stirred by old rumors. The camp moved like a body under threat, every part tense and ready. Yet there were other tensions too, quieter ones. It's the kind that build inside a family before they turn loud. A man named Flint Howell began speaking openly near the fires. He said secrets rot the soul of a tribe. He said hidden bloodlines bring only war. He said if the note proved a claim, it should be judged by all, not guarded by a few. People listened because Flint Howell was respected, and because fear makes people hungry for certainty. But I saw how he looked at Iron Elk. I saw the old rivalry in his eyes, the kind that never fully dies. I heard others whisper that Flint Howell's own brother had once been passed over for leadership. I heard whispers that the note might undo what had been decided long ago. Another voice rose too, softer but steady. A woman named Raven Dusk, a healer known for truth-telling, warned the camp not to let outsiders twist their minds. She said a list of names could be a net. She said some men create chaos so they can bargain with it. She said if the strangers wanted the note, they wanted more than a story. They wanted leverage. That same day, Black Crow returned from the settlement edge with grim news. He said a wagon had been seen heading toward the nearest fort. He said a clerk in town had been asking about old land boundaries and treaty lines. He said the kind of questions asked by men who plan to write new rules over old lives. My stomach nodded. Land meant survival. Land meant graves and water and sacred places. If someone used the note to challenge who belonged where, it could turn neighbor against neighbor. It could make the camp vulnerable at the exact time outsiders were circling. Iron. Elk called me to meet him by the river that evening. The sun was low, turning the water red like spilled wine. He stood with his hands behind his back, watching the current. For a long moment, he did not speak. Then he asked me what I remembered of my father. I told him the truth. I remembered almost nothing. A shadow in a doorway, a scent of smoke and leather, a lullaby hummed under breath. Then nothing but stories told by Stone Willow. Iron Elk nodded slowly, like my answer confirmed something he had feared. He said there were men who wore many faces back then. Traders, guides, scouts, men who could cross between worlds and vanish when it suited them. He said one such man had made promises with his tongue and betrayal with his hands. He said some debts were paid in silence, others in blood, and a few in hidden children. I felt my throat tighten. I asked him again what the note said. His jaw tightened. He told me the note carried a truth that could protect me or destroy me, depending on who held it. He said the stranger with the list was not the worst threat. The worst threat was someone inside the camp who might steal the Bible to settle an old score, as if his words summoned it. We heard shouting from the direction of our cabin. It was not one voice. It was many. The sound rose sharp and angry, then broke into frantic cries. Iron Elk's head snapped toward it. He started running before I did, moving fast, despite his years. When we reached the cabin, Stone Willow was outside, pale as ash. Her hands were empty. Her eyes were wild. She grabbed my arm and whispered that the Bible was gone. For a moment, the world went still. The camp noise faded. The wind stopped mattering. All I could hear was my own heartbeat and the distant hoofbeats of someone fleeing into the night. Iron Elk stood in the doorway, staring at the empty table where the Bible had been. His face was hard, but his eyes showed pain. He turned slowly, scanning the shadows beyond the cabins and lodges, as if he could see the thief's path written in the dark. Then he spoke, low and final. He said whoever took it knew exactly what they were doing. He said the hunt had begun, and he said if the Bible reached the wrong hands before dawn, the plains would burn with the kind of trouble. That does not end clean. The camp moved like a wounded animal after the Bible vanished. Fires flared higher than they should have, casting long shadows that twisted across the ground. Voices rose and fell, sharp with accusation and fear. No one slept. Mothers pulled children close. Warriors checked their weapons again and again, not knowing which direction danger would come from. The loss of the Bible was more than theft. It was a tearing away of the one thing that had kept the past contained. Iron Elk took control with a calm that cut through the chaos. He sent trackers in 3 directions, men and women who could read broken grass and disturbed dust like written words. Swift Coyote returned first, breathless, saying the thief headed toward the old ravine where the rocks split like open jaws. That place had always been avoided. It was where voices echoed wrong and horses spooked for no clear reason. Stone Willow stayed behind, watched by Ash, Bear, and Raven Dusk. She did not cry anymore. Her face had gone still, as if all her strength had turned inward to hold her upright. Before I left, she touched my cheek and told me no matter what was written on that paper, I was her child. Her words steadied me more than any weapon could. I rode with Iron Elk in a small group, the night air cold against my skin. The moon rode high, too bright, making every shadow feel like a threat. As we neared the ravine, Iron Elk raised his hand and we dismounted. The ground here told a story even I could read. Fresh tracks. 1 horse. Another walking beside it. 2 people then. No, 3. 1 moving carefully, 1 stumbling, 1 confident. Flint Howell's name moved through my mind like a dark bird. He knew the camp well. He knew the weight of that Bible. He also knew how to stir men's fears. But Iron Elk did not speak names. He followed the trail with a grim patience, jaw tight, eyes scanning the rocks above us. A sound drifted down from the ravine, voices carried by Stone. One voice was low and smooth, not from our people. Another was strained, defensive. A third was sharper, angry, familiar. My heart began to pound so hard I feared it would give us away. Iron Elk signaled us to wait. We crouched behind boulders, listening. The smooth voice spoke of money, land, papers stamped by men who lived far away. It spoke of old treaties and newer laws. It spoke of how a single note could prove a claim worth more than gold. Flint Howell's voice answered, bitter and proud. He said he only wanted the truth out in the open. He said Iron Elk had held power too long. He said the camp deserved to know who truly belonged at the center of leadership. Then came the third voice, shaking, desperate. It was the stranger with the list. He said the note had to be taken to the fort before sunrise. He said, if it did not arrive, others would come, and they would not ask so gently. He said the plains were changing whether the tribe liked it or not. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This was not just about one camp. It was about control, about who would decide the future as the old world gave way to a new one. The Bible was no longer just a family relic. It was a key, and too many hands wanted it. Iron Elk rose from cover before anyone could stop him. He stepped into the moonlight, tall and unarmed, his voice carrying clear across the ravine. He called Flint Howell by name. He said betrayal spoken as justice was still betrayal. He said selling the soul of the camp to outsiders would not bring peace, only chains. Flint Howell laughed, sharp and bitter. He said Iron Elk feared losing his throne. He said bloodlines mattered whether Iron Elk liked it or not. He held up the Bible, waving it like a banner. The sight of it made my stomach twist. That book had crossed generations, wars, sorrow. Now it was being used like a weapon. The stranger shifted nervously, glancing at the rocks above. He knew he was outnumbered. He reached for his rifle, not fully, just enough to show intent. The tension snapped tight, so tight it felt like the air itself might break. Iron Elk took another step forward. He spoke of the promise made long ago, of how it was meant to end bloodshed, not start it anew. He spoke of a child hidden to protect life, not power. His eyes found me then, and for a moment the world narrowed to that look. It was filled with regret and hope tangled together. Flint Howell's face flickered. Doubt, maybe, or fear of being remembered not as a truth-teller, but as a man who opened the door to ruin. The stranger pressed him harder, urging him to hand over the Bible and ride now. He said, daylight would bring soldiers. He said the fort would listen to written proof, not spoken stories. Before Flint Howell could answer, a cry echoed from above. Swift Coyote and the other trackers had circled wide and now stood along the rim, silhouettes against the sky. The ravine was trapped. There would be no easy escape. The stranger swore and raised his rifle fully. In that instant, Iron Elk moved faster than I believed possible. He lunged, knocking the barrel aside. The shot went wide, cracking against stone. Chaos erupted. Men shouted. Horses screamed. Someone fell. I ran forward without thinking, driven by something older than fear. Flint Howell stumbled back, clutching the Bible to his chest like a shield. His eyes met mine, wide and searching. I saw a man torn between pride and panic. He shouted that it was too late, that once the truth was known, nothing could stop it. I shouted back that truth without care could burn everything it touched. The stranger tried to flee, scrambling up the ravine wall, but Swift Coyote cut him off. Red Thunder appeared from the shadows, his presence like a wall. The outsider froze, trapped by faces that showed no mercy for lies. Iron Elk stood between Flint, Howell, and the rest of us, breathing hard now, blood seeping from a cut along his arm. He did not seem to notice it. He told Flint Howell to hand over the Bible. He said the council would hear him. He said there was still a path that did not end in destruction. Flint Howell's grip tightened. His knuckles went white. He looked from Iron Elk to me, to the stranger and back again. The moonlight caught the Bible's worn cover, making it seem almost alive. I felt the weight of generations pressing down, waiting to see which way this moment would turn. Then came the sound of distant hoofbeats, many of them rolling across the plains like thunder. Heads turned, faces drained of color. Someone shouted that riders were coming fast from the direction of the fort. Iron Elk's eyes hardened. He said there was no more time. He told Flint Howl to choose where he stood, with the people who raised him or with men who would use him and discard him. He said the dawn would judge them all. The hoofbeats grew louder. The ravine filled with tension so thick it hurt to breathe. Flint Howl looked toward the sound, then down at the Bible, then at me one last time. His mouth opened as if to speak, and before he could, a rifle cracked from the ridge above, sending sparks off stone and forcing everyone to drop low. The night exploded into motion again. Somewhere in the chaos, the Bible slipped from Flint Howl's hands, tumbling across rock and dirt, coming to rest near the edge of the ravine. I saw it lying there, so close and yet unreachable, as riders closed in and the first light of dawn began to stain the sky. The past, the future, and the truth itself balanced on that single moment. Waiting to see who would reach it first, the rifle crack faded into the stone, leaving behind a ringing silence that felt heavier than the noise itself. Everyone stayed low for a breath that seemed to last forever. Dust drifted through the ravine, glowing pale in the first weak light of dawn. Then Iron Elk moved. He stepped forward, slow and steady, putting himself between the fallen Bible and every weapon aimed its way. The riders from the fort crested the ridge at that moment, pulling up hard when they saw the scene below. They wore stiff coats and carried rifles, but their eyes showed uncertainty. They had expected a simple exchange, not a standoff, layered with old wounds and watching warriors. Red Thunder climbed the rocks to meet them halfway, his voice calm but firm. He told them this land held its own laws, older than paper and stamps. He told them no blood would be spilled this morning. Flint Howl sank to his knees. The fight had drained out of him all at once. He stared at the ground where the Bible lay, his shoulders shaking. When Iron Elk spoke his name, there was no anger in his voice now, only sadness. Flint Howl said he thought the truth would give him justice. He said he did not see how easily truth could be twisted into a blade. Iron Elk helped him to his feet, not as a chief helping a rival, but as one man steadying another who had lost his way. Swift Coyote retrieved the Bible, lifting it gently, brushing dirt from its cover. He carried it to Stone Willow. It arrived at the edge of the ravine with Ash Bear and Raven Dusk. When she took it back into her hands, she closed her eyes and breathed as if a weight had finally eased from her chest. The book had traveled far that night, but it had come home. The fort riders were told to leave. Red Thunder spoke clearly, telling them the matter they chased was not theirs to claim. He warned them that pressing further would only bring more trouble than any paper could justify. The leader of the riders studied the faces around him, counted the numbers, and nodded once. They turned back the way they came, their hooves fading into the distance as the sun rose higher, with the outsiders gone. Iron Elk called for the council to gather at once. Not later, not after rest, but now, while the truth still stood in the open air. Everyone came. Elders, warriors, healers, families. No one was turned away. Stone Willow stood beside me, the Bible held against her heart. My legs felt unsteady, but I did not step back. Iron Elk spoke first. He told the story plainly, without embellishment. He spoke of a time when fear ruled decisions and promises were broken to prevent greater bloodshed. He spoke of a child hidden not in shame but in hope. He spoke of the note placed in the Bible as a witness, not a weapon. When he finished, he asked Ash Bear to speak. She confirmed his words, adding pieces she had carried quietly for decades. Then Stone Willow spoke. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger as she went on. She told of her mother's journey, of love found where it was least expected, of raising a child with care while guarding a truth that could have torn her apart. She said she chose silence to give me peace, not to steal my future. Tears ran freely now, not just from her eyes, but from many gathered there. All eyes turned to me. My chest felt tight, but I spoke the only truth I knew. I said I did not seek power or title. I said I loved this land because it raised me, not because of what any note might say. I said blood may tell a story, but choice decides the ending. I said I would stand with the people who stood with me, whatever name they called me by. The council was quiet for a long moment. Then Raven Dusk stepped forward. She said the truth had been heard. She said it did not demand crowns or removals, only honesty. She said leadership earned through years of service did not vanish because of a hidden past. She said the note revealed history, not a command. One by one, elders nodded. The tension that had gripped the camp for days began to loosen. Iron Elk remained war chief, not because a paper allowed it, but because the people chose it. Flint Howell accepted judgment, not punishment, but a season of service, tending to those he had nearly harmed. He bowed his head and agreed. As the sun climbed, the camp breathed again. Fires were rekindled for warmth, not defense. Children crept closer, sensing the danger had passed. Horses settled. The land itself seemed to relax. Later that day, Iron Elk came to me alone. He told me the note named my father as a man who walked between worlds, bound by love and fear in equal measure. He told me, my blood tied me to stories on both sides of the plains, but my life belonged to me alone. He said the past had finally spoken its piece and could now rest. Stone Willow placed the Bible back on its shelf that evening. The note remained inside, no longer hidden, no longer feared. It was part of the family story now, not a secret waiting to explode. She smiled at me then, a real smile, the kind I had not seen in a long time. Days turned into weeks. The stranger with the list was never seen again. The Fort Riders did not return. Word traveled, but it traveled without fire this time. The camp grew stronger for having faced the truth together. Flint Howell worked quietly, rebuilding trust, one act at a time. Ash Bear passed on her stories, knowing they would be carried forward at last. I found myself walking the land with new eyes. Every trail felt deeper. Every sunrise felt earned. I understood now that identity is not something taken from ink on paper. It is shaped by choices, by love given and received, by standing firm when the ground shakes. On a calm evening, Iron Elk and I sat near the river. He told me the strongest leaders are not those who cling to power, but those who protect peace, even when it costs them pride. I told him I had learned that silence can save lives, but truth must eventually breathe. We watched the water move past us, carrying reflections of sky and land together. The story that began with a note falling from a Bible did not end in blood or loss. It ended in understanding. The past was acknowledged, the present claimed, and the future left open. Wide as the plains themselves, and as the stars came out, steady and sure, I knew one thing with calm certainty. I belonged. Not because of what was written long ago, but because the people I stood with chose me, and I chose them in return.